My name is Cameron Horner, and as I get set up, I'm super pumped to be here. And I'm going to share my story with you, at least a portion of it. In August 2011, through a sudden and unexpected injury, I became part of the largest minority group in the world, the disabled community. I was 18 years old. I was on family vacation a few days before leaving for college to begin a life of ministry. I dove into shallow water, broke my neck, and became immediately paralyzed. I did not make it to the school that I had originally planned on, but the Lord brought me into ministry through a different path. While the story of what happened that day is quite unique and miraculous, I only want to share one portion of it and invite you to my website to see a short video that tells more. Shameless plug, I know, sorry. For now, I will share this. Immediately after my neck broke, I was unable to move any portion of my body. I did not float up enough to get air and was helplessly trapped under the water. I was not sure that anyone would find me, but in the intensity of the moment, the Spirit of the Lord came over me and led me to prayer. I remember a number of emotions during this experience, including the clear realization that I could die under those waters. I also remember the tangible peace that washed over me, one that I clearly interpreted as, "You will be okay." Other details I must leave out, but I will set your mind at ease and let you know that I did, in fact, survive. I was wondering if y'all would laugh at a morbid joke. Yeah. At the very last moment, sorry, my iPad just went on the fritz. At the very last moment, the friend that I had been swimming with, a former lifeguard, found me, flipped me over, supported my head, and began pulling me back to shore. As she did, again, the Spirit of the Lord came over me, and I began to call out to him. I did so by quoting healing scriptures that I had memorized in the year prior, and by saying the name of Jesus on repeat. By his stripes I am healed. In Jesus' name I am healed. These were the words that were flowing from my lips. The people around me did not know how to interpret my response, and in the months that followed, this story and other details spread. But this response did not happen in a vacuum. There was a reason that my initial call to God was for healing. You see, I had met the Lord in a profound, indescribable way just a year prior to this injury. He had drawn me and my family so close and changed my life prior to this injury. He gave me a firm foundation to weather the coming storm, and the storm did come. And for that, for his intervention there, I am forever grateful. But this experience of personal awakening happened in the context of the faith healing or word of faith movement. Yes, Kenneth Copeland was my guy. If you're not familiar with the prosperity gospel and all of its iterations, then boy, are you missing out. When I was suddenly injured and placed in such a difficult situation, my faith response to Jesus was to call out to him for healing. And let me just say this. Jesus honored that 18-year-old Cameron's expression of faith. Jesus came immediately so close to me and my family, and over the next months and years, he did not leave. Even when others did leave, the tangible, felt presence of God was always steady. After this injury, I was taken to a local hospital and put back together again through 18 hours of surgery. I emerged from surgery with new scars. I was then slowly stabilized enough to be flown to a rehab center in Atlanta, Georgia, and began the 4-month journey of rehabilitation at the Shepherd Center Spinal Rehab Center. I said center too many times there. Shepherd Spinal Cord Injury Rehab Center. Here, I learned to live life again from a wheelchair. This place became my new home, and the other injured patients in their wheelchairs became part of my family. And yes, a hospital full of people in wheelchairs still means we could get into some mischief, especially during the wheelchair races through the hallways. Our poor nurses, they loved us. After 4 months, I finally returned to my home in North Carolina. You can hear the accent probably. I don't think there's any y'alls in here in my presentation, but Was there? Did I use one? Y'all just have patience with me. So I returned home, and while I was excited, I was honestly a bit nervous to return home, as I knew that I would be returning to a world not set up for people with disabilities like the rehab center had been. The transition occurred, however, and fairly quickly I began receiving invitations to share my story at various venues. And thus, the ministry that I had felt called into prior to my injury began, but needless to say, it looked vastly different than I had planned. I now want to turn to a few key elements of my experience since that time that will be helpful for our purposes here. The first elephant in the room is the fact that someone from the faith healing community who believed it was always God's will to heal experienced a major accident that left them disabled. That was my story. So what does a person like this do? They, of course, apply the practices that they know to do in order to get their healing. The tapes, the prayers, the healing scriptures. And how long will they do this for? Well, it depends on the person. I'm rather hard-headed, so had the Lord not intervened, who knows how long I would have sought for healing. But I'll get to the Lord's intervention here in a moment. First, I need you to know this. The stories that you hear about the experience of people with disabilities in the church are true. You see, my experience with faith healing is not the only part of my story. Most of my story has been spent serving in the church. Lots of different churches, actually. I've experienced in churches around the United States, some in Europe, even India. I also have weekly experiences with my own local church at home. And I want to say this. Most of my experience has been good and beautiful, truly, overwhelmingly. I actually want to say this. I would rather experience disability in the church than probably anywhere else, because we have a Messiah who laid a foundation for us. But I have experienced the difficult and painful side of living the Christian life with a disability. And I now want to share just a few of these difficult experiences. In the first couple of years after my injury, the space that I originally felt most comfortable in, the charismatic assembly, slowly became the space that I was most uncomfortable in. You see, I knew what everyone was thinking because I knew what I used to think. When I saw someone with a disability, I knew it was their faith that was the problem. This growing discomfort in me that I felt came also from various experiences that proved my suspicions. There are conferences where I know going in that there will be a certain number of people who come over to pray for me. This is the basic expectation that someone with a visible disability has when going into certain types of conferences or churches. And they really like praying for wheelchair people. Just going to say that. And wheelchair people is not that's me. You probably shouldn't say that. I've been in spaces where the prayer team goes out to hunt down people like me. And they found me, prayed for me, asked if they could move my legs for me, etc. The last time this happened, I actually got a little bit sassy. But thankfully, my mama corrected me for that later. I've been in services where I'm pointed out as an object lesson that demonstrates the deficiency of the group's faith. But if only those people knew. If only they could see what I had gotten to see and experience what I had gotten to experience. That what was a legitimate injury and a legitimate loss to grieve over ended up being so far from a tragedy that the word doesn't even come to my mind when I'm sharing my journey. What if they had stopped to listen? Then there's the side of my story regarding the intersection between my disability and life and ministry. I've had the opportunity to speak from hundreds of platforms or stages and can count on one hand the number of locations that had ramps onto the stage. How do I get onto the platform? I'm carried, usually in the middle of service when it's my turn to speak. I used to make a joke afterwards how my faith was being tested when I was being carried. This was an attempt to soften the awkwardness and embarrassment, but I don't make the jokes anymore. The next difficulty that I'll share is the difficulty of relationships that is endemic for people with disabilities. Within the first year of my injury, the relationships that were so close to me were all but gone. Some of this was my stage of life, but some of it was awkwardly obvious. This is something that is a shared experience for many people with disabilities. It is often hard to find the people to do life with. And let's not even get started on romantic relationships. If only the friends that leave knew what we added to their lives. It's perhaps in the context of my old home church that I learned the most about broad responses to people with disabilities. This was the church that I had served at every single week for the first 10 years after my injury. As an example of such attitudes, once the executive pastor took me out for sushi, which was a plus. He did good there. But in the course of our conversation, he eventually got to the part where he essentially explained why I was not healed. Unfortunately for him, I knew the talking points. He even missed a few points. I almost corrected him on his faith healing rundown. But perhaps one of the most painful experiences I'll go into slightly more detail about. Mostly because it's so common, but also because it's something that so often goes under the radar, unseen by the able-bodied masses, and is perhaps the primary reason why so few people with disabilities are in our churches. My home church was the mega church in the area, and they gave me a very gracious welcome home after my injury. Truly, they did. But as the years went on, I became aware of the latent attitude held towards people with disabilities. This church was not where I learned the faith-healing gospel. They seemed like your standard mega church, actually. They were probably not much different than your church, most likely. But I was always held at arm's length by the lead pastors, was never asked to contribute to the overall church from the stage, and I often had to make my own way there. Little off my notes here. It was Preston or someone that talked about there's a lack of leadership by disabled people in our churches. I have experienced that, awkwardly. The exceptions were the lovely pastors over the other ministries in the church. But to demonstrate an example of what can happen to disabled people in various church communities, in 2014 through 16, this church built a new building to accommodate growth. So we're expanding, built a new building. I offered my services to the leadership to help in areas of accessibility as they designed the new building. However, I was never contacted. And when I finally entered the new sanctuary of our new building, I entered a space that I immediately saw was built without the disabled in mind. There was no space for the disabled to sit without getting out of their wheelchairs. Because of a number of complaints, there was a section eventually designated for the disabled, but it required that they be segregated from their friends and family. And perhaps the most painful part for me, there was no ramp onto the stage, thus solidifying the suspicions that had been growing within me. When these concerns were brought up, I was taken around to different areas of the church as the sushi executive pastor explained to me why it was technically ADA compliant. I love it when able-bodied people explain to me why I'm wrong about particular accessible issues. At this church that I had served at so faithfully, I was an afterthought. It was this and other experiences that caused me to realize that our approach to ministry in the church is very much like market capitalism, where we attempt to create a product that will be bought by the largest amount of people. Supply and demand, efficiency. This is not an evaluation statement of capitalism. Others are more suited for that. It's simply an observation that our ministry approach seems to be more affected by our secular economic model than the method of Jesus. We want to tailor our church experiences so that it reaches the most amount of people, but in doing so, too many have decided to neglect minority populations. You have to come to realize that the life of a disabled person is a life of working around a world that is set up for
for able-bodied people. That's just what we have to do. If a church begins to focus on minority populations at all, disabilities are often left out because, let's face it, we're the most difficult to accommodate. Others can see to them our mission statement doesn't include that ministry. But Jesus started in the opposite direction. He went after the minority, especially the disabled. Jesus avoided the crowd but welcomed the outcast. In doing so, Jesus healed more than people's bodies. He healed their social standing within the community. To close, I want to return to what the Lord did in those initial years after my injury to reframe my understanding of disability, suffering, and my position as a person in a wheelchair. It was through the influence of a different local community that met in the living room of a local pastor on Monday nights for a men's group. As briefly mentioned a moment ago, and as our earlier presenters point out, the social aspect of Jesus' ministry was perhaps the more profound aspect. When Jesus healed a person, he did not just heal their bodies, he restored them to the community, thus healing them socially. As Nancy Eastland states in her book, The Disabled God, by the way, kind of academic, but worth a read. Really good, The Disabled God. She says this, often healings restored the person not only to an able-bodied state, but also to social participation and religious inclusion. And I would argue that this second element of healing is the most meaningful in the interaction, the social side. This is the kind of thing that occurred for me in this Monday night men's group. I entered this gathering for the first time in 2013, a little over a year after my injury. I entered into this community still carrying deep shame over my position as a person in a wheelchair. I carried this shame because of social stigma that I had imbibed and because of a theology of disability that did not make room at the table for people whose bodies were broken. As my mentor says, ideas have consequences. And people with disabilities have to experience the outcome of various theologies held by the church today. However, at this men's group, their theology made room for me and my disability. In fact, their theology took what I saw as something to be ashamed of and moved it instead to a place of honor. You may not even agree with their specific theology, but my question is, does your theology have a space for the disabled? Theirs made room for me at the table. But not only did they make room for me at the table, they went further and said to me, Cameron, move up higher to this place of honor, even allowing me a place of leadership in their midst. I'll actually be speaking there this coming Monday. It was this space and atmosphere that allowed me to begin the process of having my perspective on disabilities reshaped. I invite you to do the same in your church, home, and lives. You see, through having a space like this, the Lord began the process that I needed to go on of understanding the beauty and the gift that my disability truly was. I was at last able to identify the scars that I carried from surgeries with the scars that Jesus carried from his cross. My disability is not a thing that's a problem. It's a thing that's brought me so much closer to the Lord. And through it, he's given me a unique perspective on life, suffering, new creation, etc. That said, I invite the church to repent for the ways that we have treated the disabled. People with disabilities need to be in your church because they have perspectives that you don't have. I could not see this, not really, until a space was finally created for me to be healed socially and to be welcomed into the community as a full human and to see the unique cross that I bear as a thing not to be removed, not yet, but instead to be rejoiced and celebrated in. Thank you.
I've got a few practical questions, and if even my wording's like off or insulting, just let me know so I don't ask it that way again, okay?
Just don't say wheelchair people.
Well, okay, okay. I want to know what your sassy response was. Could you share what your sassy response was?
I was probably just like agreeing, but with, I don't know, a little bit of arrogance and sass in my tone. Okay. I was actually, to be full disclosure, I was still at that time not fully sure where I was with healing and seeking the Lord for healing. And so I was going along with it. And actually, so I was at a conference, and this particular prayer team had come up to me before. And I had gone with it, like, yes, you can move my legs, because I was still in the faith healing thing. And so I was maybe in the middle of the process on this last time that they had come over. And I was agreeing, but just kind of, I don't know. Even if you disagree with somebody, I guess me personally, I'm like, let's still be courteous, you know. And there was probably a more courteous way of just saying no to them, and I wasn't courteous. But my mom corrected me, so thank you.
Okay, so here's another question. Do you appreciate it when people first meet you and they really early on in that conversation ask, hey, how did you end up in a wheelchair? Like, is that totally fine, or is that insulting, or is there maybe a way people go about that question that could be off-putting, or?
Yeah, great question. So as broad as the category of disability is, so is everybody's take on their personal disability and on questions like that. I'm pretty chill, I feel like. So if someone were to come up and ask me first off, how'd you get hurt? I wouldn't have a big problem. But I will say, me personally, I deeply appreciate if you at least spend a few minutes treating me like a human. And then if you want to ask, that's fine. Seriously, I'd love to share. Just like we don't mind saying, I'm a disabled person. We don't mind sharing our story. We went through it, and we don't mind sharing it. But again, I think other people are going to have different responses to that question. So
would you say would it be pretty universal, maybe, that if that's the very first thing people ask without even asking what your name is, or
don't do that. Just don't do that. Don't do that. If you do that, the person is going to automatically think you have a view of disability that is probably a pretty low view. Maybe, I don't know, or maybe not even a low view, but just you. I don't know. I'm going to say the wrong thing. Just don't do that. Just don't do that.
That's fair. Julie, in what ways do your kids reflect Jesus and the gospel in ways that people without Down syndrome don't do or struggle with? I've heard you talk about this before, and it was kind of paradigm shifting for me.
Yeah, I think there's so many ways. One of the ones that I feel like is most profound is just by who they are. They do reveal people's character. They don't try to do that. It's just kind of in their nature. It's not that they're revealing people's personalities. That's not what they're revealing. It's, I think when we encounter someone that we, maybe don't know how to interact with, there are certain qualities that come out in us, whether it's fear or intimidation or insecurity, things like that. And I think those are really beautiful things to become aware of. They help us to become self-aware so that Christ can really change those things in us. I think that's really beautiful. I love that about them. So I love to watch their interactions. But I will, every individual with Down syndrome is an individual. They're all different. Even my two boys have very different personalities. So you can't say across the board, they all do this. But I will say, my son with Moses, our oldest, he is one of the most inclusive, joyful. When you enter his presence, you feel like, he has prepared a place for a celebrity when you show up, because he loves people. I would say, the unhindered joy that Jonah demonstrates no matter what, even about the simplest things. There's just so many things that I learn about them that are essential to the kingdom of God, whether it's inclusion, welcoming, joy, just simply by being who they are.
Is Moses, I've never seen Moses sad. Does he get down? I feel like life's just one big party for Moses whenever I've seen him.
I used to call him a party in a little body. But he, over the last year and a half, he actually has developed a neurological condition that has been pretty challenging for him and pretty painful, and has added basically a new disability into his diagnosis, and that's been pretty challenging. So we've seen a lot of mood changes because of what he's going through.
Okay. I guess for both of you, whoever wants to go first, what are some well-intended and yet possibly condescending or insulting things that people can do or say around you? I mean, you talked a lot about the kind of healing thing, you know, or even maybe it's even like, you know, praying. Actually, let me start there. When people say, "Hey, can I pray for you?" How does that land?
Yeah, again, everybody's going to answer that different. I kind of have a standing rule for me. If you ask to pray for me, well, depending on the setting, but generally speaking, that's fine. Part of that's because I'm still fairly charismatic. I don't know if I made that clear. Praying in tongues in the back before we came out. Is that okay to say?
Yeah,
Anyway.
I was weirded out,
Yeah.
but yeah, that's fine.
I'm still fairly charismatic, so like I still believe in healing, all those things. But maybe the Lord wants to do something else through this person's prayer. So I'm like, that's fine. I draw the line at, and I had to make this decision a few years ago when the question comes, try to move something, or can I move your leg for you? And I remember it was very difficult for me to make that because I was like, is this a deficiency in my faith if I don't try and move or if I don't let them do this thing? And I finally had to just make the decision, no, I'm not going to do that anymore. And then it's harder to actually like tell somebody that when they ask you. But so me, I'm fine with prayer. But again, there's going to be people that may be not fine with that. I think the last thing I want is for us to be on pins and needles around people with disabilities when we leave this place. Like I think a good rule of thumb is like, have some interaction first, you know, get to know them before you, hey, what happened? Or you poor thing, or can I pray for you? Take 30 seconds and then ask if you really feel led to pray, just take some time to ask them like, would you be okay if I pray for you? And maybe start with something other than healing. I don't know, like maybe the Lord has something else for them. And then let them pray for you afterwards. Hey, can you pray for me now? I don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's good. How about you?
Yeah, I would say in general, I think of the families I know and the way I feel is I think we can kind of read each other. And if someone is coming with a pure heart, you know, and true curiosity, I really don't have a problem at all. I feel like very little is genuinely offensive. Now, though I will say we should definitely end the word retarded to say, oh, that's so retarded. Just like unjust is something that should be completely eliminated from our conversations. It is something that is actually very hurtful. Other than that, I think, you know, if you have questions about my children or our life or, you know, how can I help you or what is this like, I don't think any of that is offensive, personally.
Okay. All right, some questions from the audience. How can we show inclusiveness to kids with a disability of which they may be rowdy and distracting to other kids while maintaining the attention of everyone else? I'm sure you probably handled that. Got that a lot as a church leader.
Yeah, I love that question. So I think one of the best ways in a children's ministry is to empower and equip the other children. I think that should be your number one goal. And I personally think that, you know, creating a very structured, orderly environment is secondary to teaching children inclusiveness and kindness. And like with my daughter, you know, if Jonah is having a meltdown or something, I'll say, I wonder what's going on. Let's go ask him. Does he need a hug? And that truly has shaped her where I don't have to really give those prompts anymore. So I think the first thing to do in a children's ministry is to equip the other children. And you will see amazing things happen.
Good. I guess for each of you, or either of you, both and, how do I read a verse like, I am fearfully and wonderfully made when my daughter has a severe genetic disability?
So I would say, you know, when I think about things that are fearfully and wonderfully made, I think of what is the essence of the kingdom of God? What's the essence of Jesus? What's the essence of everything that is beautiful in our faith? What does your daughter teach you about the Lord? Like, what are the beautiful things that he has created? And, I certainly am not, unaware that the pain of some genetic anomalies can cause children. So, that is definitely a tension. But the beautiful things of the kingdom of resilience, joy, how they teach people love and sacrifice, like what true love really is, not this feeling of, I feel, loving towards you, but like I choose to love you, and I actually get way more in return. I think there's beautiful like essences of the kingdom of God in a person.
I've got a practical question for Cameron. I was actually thinking about this, and this is one of those, like, I don't hope even asking this is like good. Do you prefer that someone stoop or squat when they're chatting with you? When I first met you at the after party, it was so crowded and we're standing.
Yeah.
And I felt that. I was like, man, does it feel like I'm talking down to you? And I don't even know if I ended up what I did, but
Yeah,
I've had that. I stayed standing.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
No.
love to hear. Yeah.
Honestly, it's not something I've thought about a ton. I have thought about it over the years. I'll say my response, kind of my reaction to when people do that. I just have always thought that was really thoughtful of them to do that. I think in just like a quick interaction, sometimes it can feel awkward or forced. But like, if we're having like, I don't know, more than a couple minutes conversation, maybe they go grab it. If there's a chair nearby, they grab it and sit down. It has actually been meaningful for me.
Okay.
But it's not something where it's like, if they don't do that, I'm thinking, man, they're standing up there. But practically speaking, if it's loud and you're up here and I'm down here, it is actually, like COVID with the mask thing, I was even going to church, I was like, I cannot hear anybody, or they can't hear me because I'm like having to like speak up and it's loud. And I got this mask on and they're way up here. And so when someone was sitting, it actually helped a lot to just be able to have a conversation. So again, I wouldn't force it. Don't be awkward. That's like tokenizing. But I don't know, if you have the opportunity to, it does mean a lot to me when it's happened. So
Good, that's helpful.
that's a good question.
Couple more. If people are leaving the church because your kids are not welcomed, how do we equip people serving in children's ministries to be more inclusive? I guess that's kind of for each of you, really. But
Can you read the question again?
Yeah. If people are leaving the church because their kids are not welcomed, how do we equip people serving in children's ministry to be more inclusive? Like, so people serving in kids' ministries, what are some things we need to teach them to do so that other kids aren't leaving kids with disabilities?
I feel like this is a Julie question.
Well, I remember the first time I visited a church that had like a disability ministry to children. And the woman who oversaw that ministry came out and met me. I was with Moses. And she said, hey, this is who I am. We have, a disability ministry. Let me show you around. What do you need? And I couldn't stop crying. It was so meaningful to me that she recognized and she approached us. So that's really beautiful. I would say, everybody should really be equipped for it. So greeters, when we had a support and inclusion ministry at the collective, and we called it support and inclusion because we were there to come alongside of a child, support them so that they could be included as best as they could be, and according to what they really desired. And so ultimately, in that, we trained our volunteers to be greeters, so that they could recognize people, bring them in, find out their level of need and how we could care for them, and anything that we needed to know about their child. And there's also really great organizations that you can find, like behavioral interventionists to work with your church. I would be happy to help people to be resourced with those types of organizations who can train and equip your volunteers. Occupational therapists, if you have any of those in your community, they can teach about sensory integration. If you have speech therapists, special education teachers. So what I would recommend is finding people who professionally work in the field, working with children with disabilities, empower them, learn from them, but most importantly, learn from the families and the children. Find out what are your child's needs, how can we support them, and really include that community. And because I think if you don't, then you'll probably miss the mark. You'll be frustrated, and they probably will be unintendedly hurt. So that's what I'd recommend.
Can I respond to that?
Yeah,
real quick?
absolutely.
So mine's going to be slightly less practical. So I had an article that I found that I really liked, something that they mentioned, and it basically goes on a scale similar to the earlier presenter, but a scale of like the way that ministry or to disabled people is done. So it goes from exclusion, so just not there, to separation, where it's like we have our thing and then there's their thing, to integration. It's like, okay, we're getting closer, to inclusion, and there's a picture of like little dots where everybody's included. But then the last one, and you think, oh, we hit inclusion, we're done, good job. But the last one was actually belonging. And the key with belonging is that you actually need the people with disabilities in your community and in your ministry, such that if they were gone, you would actually have a felt deficiency within the body of Christ. Thank you. Yeah. And I think, like, if you're trying to design different ministries that are more inclusive for children with disabilities, do you have other people who are in leadership with those kinds of disabilities? Because they're going to know how to prioritize that, those people, and how to serve those people. There's something that said, nothing about us without us, and that has to do with, like, you're trying to design a building or design a ministry or all this stuff for us, but without us. And so if you have this belonging where it's like they're an integral part of the leadership and the ministry function, then you're going to have people who actually have the experiences that those children have. They know what these children need, etc. So that's all I have to say about that.
I got so many good questions here. I got one more question. Let's see this one. How can we minister to parents of disabled children? We're going to go to both of you, whoever wants to start.
These are truly questions.
Well, I have friends, who have children with a wide spectrum of disabilities, and I think it depends on what the child needs. I have one friend who truly, a lot of really challenging medical needs, and I think it depends. Be their friend. They need friends. Invite their family to your house to eat a meal. Don't be afraid. If you have questions, ask them, what does your child need? How can I support you guys? How can I make sure this is going to be comfortable for you and your children? I think that would probably be a number one. Invite them to your home for dinner, or invite them to go out to dinner. Or if those two things are challenging, hey, can we come and bring you food? And we'd love to sit with you and hang out with you. And see them in their real environment and what their children are like, because their children are probably very different at home than at church, very different. And you're going to see a really beautiful side of them. So I would say those things, for children, families who have children who are medically fragile and things like that, I would say buy them Uber Eats gift cards, send them, spa days, watch their kids, hang out with them, go to their house and, bring them a coffee and just sit with the mom if their child has special health care needs, or, hopefully that was helpful.
Yeah, good. Do you have any thoughts?
Mine are
I know you're not a
similar.
parent, but
Just like treat them like normal people and make them your friends, and also maybe I'll say this. I'm going to be wrong on this, but I feel like sometimes there's a tendency to like exclude yourself if you have a child with a disability or if you're a caretaker, because you have this like imbibed social stigma that I'm a problem and we got to like avoid. So sometimes you actually have to like go after people to be their friends. And you need to do that sometimes. Like they may almost avoid sometimes, or not avoid, but just feel like a problem, and make it plain to them that they're not. That you want to be in their life and you want to be their friend. And
so. All right. Well, let's give Cameron and Julia a hand. Thank you guys so much.
Guys.
Yeah.